Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Denanu, and with this video here, we're going to be talking about a massive disappointment. We're going to be talking about Star Wars Rise of the Skywalker, and I seen the movie a few days ago, and if I had to give an overall opinion about it, definitely not a fan. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I've read some of the books, watched all the older movies, watched the prequel movies, played a lot of the games coming out, ran through all of the games on Super Nintendo, played KOTOR, I've, been around when it comes to Star Wars. Played most of the Star Wars games. I'm not going to say all, but most of them. And I'm a huge fan of the way that the whole light side versus dark side, the Jedi and the Sith, and all of the cool adventures that the books and the comic books have, in regards to various stories and characters and the mythology, and pretty much most of that stuff Disney just, took the axe to once they started making the movies. And with this newer trilogy of movies, with Rey, Finn, Poe, and all of that, I thought the first one was okay. The Force Awakens, I think that's what the first reboot movie was called, and I thought it was okay. I felt that it was like playing it safe. It's like remaking one of the older movies, essentially. But it was good. I mean, you had the older characters come back. Well, everybody besides Luke, but you had the old characters come back. They kind of hit you in the feels when it came to some of the older moments and stuff like that from the older movies. They tried to redo them in the newer movie, but after that, after the Force Awakens, things kind of died down for me when it comes to Star Wars and these newer movies. Was not feeling The Last Jedi. The greatest part I would say about that movie that I did like was finally seeing Luke Skywalker, him being the old grizzled the old man who's not gonna train Rey. That was the only sequence that I liked in that movie. Didn't like the additional, or the killing off of Luke rather, and at the ending of the movie. I didn't like him transporting his essence across the universe and all that kind of sort of stuff. But didn't like Rey's character because they never really did anything with her. Really wasn't a fan of Poe because he just seemed like a rehash of Han Solo, except he's more pilot than scoundrel, because he's not really a scoundrel, or a ne'er-do-well, I guess you could say. And the one who I think had the most potential to be something was probably Finn. Since he was a stormtrooper who basically turned rebel, and we see that all the times in the expanded media, but never in the main movies, never from like a stormtrooper's perspective. So after watching Force Awakens, I was like, oh cool, they're gonna do a lot with him, and here we are like a few years later, and they did absolutely nothing with him. Honestly, this whole what do you want to call it, the Skywalker trilogy, if I had to give it an overall opinion, it's ass. I didn't like it, and it's because they never really did anything. The writing was just bad. Like outside of the Force Awakens, the writing was bad. The storylines, hell, there's plots that don't go nowhere. Tons of plot holes with this new movie. You got Disney backtracking, trying to course correct the bullshit that was in The Last Jedi. So it's just like, it's, as a whole, like this newer trilogy is shit. And honestly, as an old school Star Wars fan, like I wasn't around when Star Wars first came out in theaters. I'm not gonna claim that. I mean, I was born in '83. So I've probably seen the movies when they first came out on home video in the late 80s to early 90s. And that's when I kind of, got hooked on it. Like, it's just, if I had to compare them, it's just they don't have the whatever that spark is that makes a decent Star Wars movie. Maybe that's George Lucas. The prequel movies, I didn't really like them either, but there was a lot of cool stuff that they introduced that I did like. You had Mace Windu, the different the lightsaber colors, the Clone Wars, all the flipping and jumping and stuff, because they didn't have none of the CG to do a lot of that stuff back in the day with the earlier ones. So it was cool to finally see Jedis fight the way they were supposed to fight. Hell, they don't even do a whole lot of that kind of fighting in these newer movies either. And I don't know if it's just maybe they're trying to tone that back. Maybe they don't want the Force to be like that. But then you got Rey out here in this new movie, like holding Star Destroyer ships. Well, not Star Destroyers, but holding ships with the Force. Teleporting objects across the planet, you know, and doing all of like these weird powers that you would assume that she would have to train most of her life to get, like most of the Jedis, you know. They kind of sort of explained it, but that reason is just shit. You know, them bringing back Palpatine was some shit, because if you're gonna do that, then do it right. And it just seems like an afterthought. Like this whole, like every movie, and I don't know, I've heard they've had production problems with the second one, and that's why I think a different person directed the second movie, and then the first guy came back for this one, I think. I could be wrong about that, don't quote me. But regardless of whatever problems you face, you should have a decent plan in motion. You know, like, and I guess the closest thing I can equate it to is Marvel. You know, with the Marvel movies, when they sat down and make those, they have a set plan. There's a goal at the end that they're trying to reach, and if bumps along the way happen, then you have alternating plans that you can switch to. Like when they got Spider-Man back, and they were like, oh, you know, okay, well maybe we can put him in this movie, and then it was like, okay, they made a plan for that, and then they did it and put him in Civil War. Whereas with these Disney movies, or with these, you know, Disney Star Wars movies, I feel like they just kind of made The Force Awakens. They was like, okay, well, what can we do? We have Star Wars, let's put out a movie. And they tried to make I'm not really going to go into the whole bashing Rey, because I know a lot of people do that, you know, and that's not, I could care less about her character because they haven't shown what her character is, so that's why I don't like her. But it seemed to me like they tried to SJW Star Wars, and I don't mind that so much as long as it's not in my face. I could care less that she's a female protagonist. Hell, I say this in every video when I talk about SJW stuff. I love the ladies. You know, I wish there was more prominent female characters out there, but there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it. They didn't go the whole Captain Marvel route. That's what they could have went. Glad they didn't, you know, choose to do that. But they made Rey into what people on the internet call a Mary Sue. I'm sorry, she is. Everything she does in all these movies is stuff that older Jedis had to train and learn how to do. She just instinctively knows how to do a lot of that stuff. And with this newer movie, they kind of sort of explain that, well, it's like, okay, well, she's a Palpatine and all that. But even if you, let's say, have the potential to be a great Force user, I would say, you still got to train and learn how to do a lot of that stuff. Like Anakin, Darth Vader, when he was younger, he was a great, powerful Force user. Hence him becoming Darth Vader and owning the galaxy after he did, essentially. But as a kid, he had this great potential with the Force. Like, yeah, he can do a lot of these extra weird things, but he couldn't explain how he did it. Like when he was pod racing and stuff, it was just like, oh, I could just pod race, I can feel it. And that was as far as that went. You know, they didn't really, you know, you still have to train to hone your power. It's like, you know, you can have a vast store of energy, but if you don't know how to use it, you can't apply it to anything. And that's my main problem with Rey, is when they came out with her character, it's like, oh, she's doing all of this cool stuff. She knows how to fight with a lightsaber. She can sense stuff. She can do the Jedi mind trick. She can do all of this stuff. And you haven't even been trained yet. Not even a little bit. And it's just like they're just giving her the abilities with the story to make the story go along without realizing that, like, no, you have to train for a lot of this shit. It's like you can't just get it. Well, I guess in Disney's Star Wars universe, apparently you can. And even if she's a Palpatine, even if she was a Skywalker, just like Ben Solo had to train. Leia apparently had to train, even though that was kind of sort of off camera, but they kind of sort of explained that too. You can't just magically get abilities and know how to become a master Jedi. That's not how shit works, or not how shit used to work, I would say. And with these newer movies here, it's just that they focus so much on getting the movie out to the audience that they didn't, who knows, maybe they don't care. Maybe they don't care about Star Wars, and maybe that's the problem. They're just looking at it as a property to be used rather than a vehicle that's gonna appease the masses. Like, to me, the biggest thing in film, when it comes to me, is story. Your writing has to be good. If you don't have good writing, everything else is going to fall apart because it's just going to be a shit movie. So your writing has to be good. You have to stay faithful to your characters, the story first. Show, don't tell, as they say in Hollywood. Where nowadays, and I don't know, it's just become, maybe Hollywood is just shit, or maybe writers, directors, or whatever. Maybe nowadays, maybe that's becoming shit too. Maybe I could be a jaded mid-30s person, but it just seems like movies were better back in the day. Outside of Marvel and kind of what they're doing, because I think that's on a different path by itself. Everybody else is making shit movies. Outside of like rare gems here and there, or things like the Joker. I thought that was going to be ass, but after watching that, no, that was a decent movie. It's outside of like rare gems here and there when it comes to like story plot driven movies. I'm not talking about comedies or anything else. It just seems like the writing of most movies now is shit. Just like I can say about how music nowadays is shit. But maybe they just don't care about none of that. Because otherwise you would have had a plan in place. Like if I was running Disney and I was like, we're gonna make a Star Wars movie. Okay, my first question is, what is our movie gonna be about? If we're planning to make a trilogy, you have to have a story that goes from movie to movie to movie. And it can't be filled with plot holes and nitpicks and a lot of the stuff. I'm not going to go into everything that's in the Rise of the Skywalker, because everybody's talking about it. So if you're want to know people's opinions, other people are saying every plot hole and every fuck up that they did with it. But the fact that they've kind of written the same story or somewhat of the same story 2 different times in 2 movies. Like The Last Jedi, it was like, oh, it was here's another Death Star, but it's a planet this time. And in this one, it's like, oh, here's this imaginary fleet filled with like millions of people that nobody knew about. It's like, it feels like a fucking fan fiction, and they all got planet destroying weapons, like, because I want all my ships to have that, feels like a fucking fan fiction. It doesn't feel like it was a cohesive movie from, after The Force Awakens. It doesn't. And that's like the main problem. Like even with The Last Jedi, I admit that movie divided the fan base. So with this movie, I get why Disney had to course correct. I truly get that. But you have to stay within the canon that you and the story that you set up in the past 2 movies and in Star Wars as a whole to fix those problems. You can't just be like, oh well shit, here's this army that nobody knew about. Well, wasn't the Empire already tore down, and that's what the Last Order was, or the Final Order, whatever they were fucking called? The people from Last Jedi. Weren't they the last of the Empire? Like, the remnants of them getting wiped out? No. Palpatine had this whole other army chilling in this unknown planet for like years and years and years, even though it's only been like 20 or 30 years. And they built all those ships with what materials, what manpower, what resources did he have available? You know, where did all of this come from? Oh no, they're not gonna explain that. Oh, he just had it. You know, it's just Rey being able to do all this stuff. She has a special connection with Ben that gives them additional powers. It's like, come on, man. It's Rise of the Skywalker is just, it's just disappointing at the end of the day. I watched that movie and I was hearing about all the reviews and about people saying, and I was like, it can't be that bad. But then I sat down and watched it and I was just like, yeah. And if you try to pick apart anything in this movie, like anything in this movie, none of it holds up because of bad writing. Light speed skipping, what the fuck is that shit? Or hyper speed skimming, whatever they fucking call that shit. That was some bullshit. Because if I remember right, they had to get away. You had to go in deep space before you could actually go to hyperspeed. That was a thing from even the older movies. You can't just jump from a planet to planet. It don't work like that. Or at least it didn't used to work like that. I mean, hell, don't even get me started on this stupid MacGuffin dagger. Don't even get me started on that bullshit. We're gonna leave it alone because I'm pretty sure everybody's probably talking about that. But like, even down to like the editing, you know, not even nothing with the movie, you know, story related or nothing like that, but just the editing of the movie. This movie felt like it was chopped and cut up. Like the first half of this movie it went by so quick. Like it was like, oh, we need to get this item. Then from that, I was like, oh, that's going to lead us to this item, and then that's going to lead us to this, and this is going to lead us to that. It's like who thought this should be a fucking Goonies movie? Like I don't write movies. Like, I'm not a Hollywood screenwriter, but it's not hard to write a basic, decent story plot. Beginning, middle, end. You know, like there's books about the shit. There's books about all the Hollywood tropes that they do in movies because they do those tropes. Hell, there's theories and ways to go about everything, even outside of the story. Like when you go watch a movie trailer, there is analysts that go, and the reason why we see movie trailers a certain way is because they know what works and what doesn't, over time of figuring that out. So even when it comes to like everything with the movie, stuff that don't make sense, like, oh, like, well, the trailer's not even the movie, but the way they cut those trailers or edit it, the sound effects in those trailers, the visual cues in those trailers, all of that is like analyzed and predetermined to get people more interested in the trailer that they're watching. And movies do the same thing. So when you have shitty editing, it's like you can't even get that right. You know, it'd be different like if the movie was competently edited, but then it was just a bad movie. You know, it's like, no, even this is a bad movie, the writing was bad, and like the editing was bad. Like the only thing that did this movie right was the fucking music. I don't know if it's the same guy who did the earlier Star Wars movies, but music guy did his damn thing. That was something that was at least getting me pumped on certain scenes. When it would switch in, you know, and kind of fade back into the older Star Wars music from the older movies. Love that. That was something that was a musical treat, I will say that. But outside of that, YouTube, nothing was good about this movie. Like, I don't know. It feels like they didn't complete anything. Like after watching this, I don't feel that Rey had a complete story arc. Probably because she didn't. Like, yeah, she beat Palpatine, but the main focus in this newer trilogy was fucking Kylo. And if I remember right, she kind of stabbed him and then healed him back up. So I mean, he just had a change of heart. It's not like she beat him and convinced him to change. It was just more like, no, I beat you, and I had a near-death experience where I hallucinated Han Solo, my dad, and he talked to me, and then he just had a change of heart. you know. Usually, I mean, I'm not so mad at what happened during that scene with him becoming good again. But usually, whenever they do that, because that's like a real big thing in Star Wars, Jedi's don't kill; they always try to convert the bad guy to good, or the Sith try to convert the good guy bad. It's a back and forth thing that's been in all the movies and the games. But it's one of those things where it just, to me, it doesn't feel earned. Like, if Kylo throughout all of these movies was the main antagonist, if he was the Darth Vader character, because I guess he was supposed to be, but in my eyes, he's nothing like Darth Vader. He's a fucking pussy, if I had to be honest. He didn't and doesn't have the gravitas that Darth Vader has. Darth Vader was a badass in every sense of the word. You know, when he was on screen in the movies, when he's in the comic books, like if you go read the comic books now, they got a Darth Vader run and it's just fucking amazing. You know, Mr. Fear and Dead Men himself is the shit. And that's when Kylo, I can say, one moment when I thought Kylo was going to be good was in The Force Awakens, in the first scene, when he froze that blaster bolt in the beginning of the movie. I was like, oh shit, I know this dude is going to be, be hot. Because he was doing some stuff that we never seen before in the movies. And how I was completely wrong about that, because that's when everything kind of went downhill with him. It would have been more sense, and I don't know why they flip-flop or felt that they needed to course correct as much, but I feel like this Rise of the Skywalker movie should have been written competently. It should have, had a couple course corrections here and there, but like, they should have looked at it and been like, look, we have to make a competent movie first, not a Mr. Fix-It type movie, because that's what I feel that they did. They basically, everything that the other director did with the last movie, they threw it under a bus and ran over it like 50 times. They killed it. They basically didn't care about other things that he introduced. They killed characters that he introduced in the second movie, and that was pretty much it. It was just like, oh, we have to have a bad guy because it can't be Kylo because he's turning good. So I don't know, let's bring back Palpatine. And then it just seems like that whole movie plot was just an afterthought. They had to get the movie out. Maybe Disney just doesn't care at the end of the day. And honestly, that's what I think it is. It's like, I don't know, a lot of people are saying Kathleen Kennedy's to blame. I don't know if it's just her. If she was the one making the decisions about the movies, then yes, the decision falls on her. And so does the blame. But it could just be one of those things where they just didn't care about what they were making. We care more than they do, essentially. And, it definitely does show with how the movie was, came out. Because I heard they had to do a lot of reshoots, which is, not really a problem. Every movie kind of goes through that. But it just seems like on a basic level, the movie just didn't hold up. The writing didn't hold up. The dialogue I thought was fine, but the plot, the story, the carryover from the last movie to this one, and then ending it with something new going into whatever they decide to do, because I know they're not going to stop making movies, all of that kind of fell and failed. To me, this movie felt like it was a quick wrap up. Like that black chick in the Dave Chappelle skit had the clock and was saying wrap it up. Like they was like, well, fuck, nobody's feeling the newer Star Wars movie, so let's wrap up all of our storylines with Rey, Finn, and Poe and start on something completely new, something where we can go in a complete new direction. That's what I feel like this movie was. This movie was a catch-all to everything that they introduced with this newer Skywalker trilogy. And I guess maybe they thought people were gonna hold this into the same regard as like the earlier movies, but I can't even do that. Like, even the prequel movies were better than this. Like prequel movies, like the Clone Wars movie, I think that's better than this and the second and The Last Jedi. Like the only movie that I could say was, can't say it was worse story-wise, because it wasn't, but I would say Revenge of the Sith. To me, that was a kind of a boring movie, you know, when I had to compare it to, let's say, Clone Wars and the older movies. Whereas this movie isn't boring, but it's like you have a lot of... This movie is like the Star Wars movie for people who have ADD. That's what this is. If you're a casual fan of Star Wars, or if you have a kid that's like 5 years old that don't know shit about Star Wars and just want to see colors on screen, that's who this movie is for. But if you're a fan of the franchise, if you're somebody who's been following, you know, Star Wars, the Star Wars brand as a whole for like 20 or 30 years, or even since the older movies, the prequel movies, or even the earlier movies before that, this movie's not made for us. And maybe they thought they could try to make it be made for us, but that's clearly not the case, YouTube. That's clearly not the case. The only bright side about this movie that I can see that they could do something with is, like I said before, is the fact that everything's wrapped up and it's over. By everything being over, they can, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, they're going to come out with another Star Wars movie. Maybe they're going to make a KOTOR movie, you know, or introduce, you know, stuff from back in the day. Do you like what KOTOR did, where it's like, oh, here's the Star Wars universe, but it's like 10,000 years in the past, to kind of show you how things got to be where they are. If they do something like that, they can do whatever they want and hopefully make a more competent, well-written, story-driven movie. But who knows if they're going to do that or not? That's the thing. They may just decide to crap out more bullshit, since everybody... I can't say everybody loves Rey as a character. She's definitely no Luke Skywalker, but I'm pretty sure maybe there are plenty of young girls out there who love her character for some reason. Don't know exactly why, since we haven't seen her character. But, you know, maybe they may keep her. Maybe they may make another movie with her that's a whole lot better. But if they beat Palpatine in this movie, which they did, they would have to just have another random Sith bad guy show up. And I guess that would be cool, but where was he at before? You know, it is what it is. That they can easily write themselves out of what they've written in this movie. So, you know, they can continue it, no problem. It's just that I think, giving all the negativity that this movie is receiving, that's not going to be the case. They're going to probably look at it and be like, well, nobody really is feeling Rey, Finn, and Poe and their Scooby-Doo mystery adventures. So we're going to go to something new. And that's honestly where I think they're going to do. And another thing that kind of pisses me off about this newer Skywalker trilogy is you have all of the books and the expanded lore that Disney crapped on to pull from. Like, there are books about there that talk about ancient Jedi and Sith doing some weird, crazy powers. So when Rey was doing some stuff in this movie, I'm like, okay, well, I don't like that. But it's not that I don't like it because it's never been done before, because we've seen Force Kill in the video games for years. It's nothing new. And teleportation probably isn't new either. But it's one of those things where it's like you have to explain and build upon those ideas in your own movie. That was the thing that really pissed me off, was that it's like, oh, she can just do it, but we as an audience haven't seen no kind of progression towards her learning these things, or even understanding what she's doing half the time. It's just, oh, here it is, she can do it. And it's like, I can't suspend my disbelief like that. You have to explain shit to me, because that's how a movie goes. You know, you have to show me why she's able to do a lot of this stuff. Show me why she's doing it, where she learned it, how she learned it. You know, you have to explain these other ancient abilities and powers and things that's happening in your movie. Like, where did this other army come from? You know, I shouldn't be having these questions as somebody who's seen the movie. It should be competently told so that I can understand every single story beat of this movie. You know, I shouldn't have to read a comic book to know, oh, what about this character? I have to read this comic book. No, fuck that. That's there if you want to read it, and if you're one of those people like myself who's like, okay, you know what, yeah, let me read more about this because I love this movie, or I love this comic, or whatever. But if you're making a movie, everything about that movie should be told in that movie. If you want to get into a side story, like, oh, what was this character doing during, this event? Then okay, then yeah, read that comic. But you shouldn't have main story beats that explain your story in your movie. That should not happen. Should not happen at all. But like I said before, maybe they just didn't care. And I'm hoping they get somebody. I heard Kathleen Kennedy was, I don't know if she left or was removed from being the head of Star Wars. I'm hoping they get somebody in there that's like Kevin Feige. I heard he was going to be doing something with Star Wars. I don't know if he's taking her place or he's going to be like their showrunner for that. If so, that would kind of suck because I hope he can do Marvel at the same time. I'm assuming Marvel was a lot of work, so I don't know if he could do that twice at the same time. But if he can, then it's because he's regardless whether you like Marvel movies or not, I can't look back at them and be like, they don't make competent movies. They make competent movies. The storylines flow together. They're consistent. They're competent, well-made movies, regardless if you like a character or you don't like their movie or not. Outside of maybe like, I want to say 2 or 3 of them, maybe 4, if I had to count Thor 2. They're not shitty movies. They're not crappy. They're not this bad. They're not, Rise of Skywalker bad, but they're not as good as their other movies. I will say that they're not as good as their main caliber of movies. So if they can get Marvel's formula and kind of rework Star Wars into that, I'm not saying turn Star Wars into a Marvel movie. I would never say that. But if they can somehow get somebody in there that's like, look, here's this plan. We're gonna take Rey, or we're gonna take whatever new character we have, and we're gonna plan out this story for like 10 movies. And then make those movies, and then make tiny changes along the way, kind of like what Marvel does. If somebody, or if the audience doesn't like a certain character or don't like certain things about whatever, make tiny changes throughout the process. Don't try to cram 4 or 5 movies worth of content into like one fucking movie like they did with this one here, and then expect it to make like $50 billion. Like, no, it doesn't work. I said this a long time, and in several different commentary videos. Anything you do in life, anything, no matter what it is, in my experience, whether it's cooking, baking food, whether you're crafting something, programming on a computer, editing videos, for YouTube, making music, no matter what it is, anything in life, the quality always suffers whenever you do it fast. Hell, just like sex, unless you're in a certain particular mood. Everything is always better when you take your time, when it's slow, when you put more quality and effort into it. When you don't try to rush things, when you plan things out, when you do things you're supposed to. Shit just works. It turns out better. I learned that lesson a long time. My dad has always taught me one lesson throughout life. Well, one of many lessons, I will say. And it was always, you can either, you have the right way to do it, and you have the wrong way to do it. And you make that choice depending on what you want to do. And your quality is going to suffer for it. If you do things the right way, you can expect a certain return. You're going to have a quality product. Do things the wrong way, you end up with the Rise of Skywalker. Every early DC movie, Batman v Superman, all of that shit. It ends up like Suicide Squad. It's gonna, anytime you rush out and do something, it's gonna be shit. It's gonna be ass, because you're not putting the same time and effort into it that you would if you were taking your time and doing it right. It's just the way it is. Now, whether Disney can do that, I would assume they can do it because they got the money, they got the time. It's not like they have to put out a Star Wars movie. They can take their time. They could, plan everything out, get everybody on board, do it right, and then put out a movie. They're not like a video game publisher where it's like, hey, hey, look, our movie has to be out by Christmas so as much as people can see it. Like, it's they can take like 2 or 3 years to build another movie, to plan shit out. But whether they will be willing to do that, that's a whole nother ballgame. And that goes back into that, maybe they don't care about it as much as we do. But maybe they'll care after the reviews of this movie comes out, because I'm pretty sure this movie's this isn't gonna make this isn't gonna make Star Wars money. Let me just say that it's a Star Wars movie that's not gonna make Star Wars money. And maybe this is that smack in the face that they needed to realize, like, oh, maybe we should change shit for the better. But I don't know. Anyways, fellas, let me stop rambling on here, because it's been about 35 minutes. If anybody's still watching this, I really do appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think of Rise of the Skywalker. And if you guys want to hear me talk about anything else, or any other movie, video game, or any other news in particular, let me know down in the comments below. My name is Dananu, and I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Peace out.